Hey guys, Adam here with ExtremeTerrain.com, and today we're taking a closer look at and installing the K&N Series 63 AirCharger cold air intake, available for the 2005 to 2011 4-liter Tacoma. Check this out if you're looking to swap out that factory paper element filter and the factory airbox for a cold air intake from the aftermarket that's going to not only increase your performance by up to 10 horsepower, but it's also going to give you a better throttle response and acceleration, and overall just a better breathing and performing engine. This here is made with the highest quality of materials, including a roto-molded polyethylene tubing to streamline that airflow from the intake filter to the throttle body and intake manifold, just making sure that you're increasing as much performance as possible, which the same cannot be said for your factory intake. It just has so many kinks. We'll take a closer look at that in just a little bit. The air filter here is arguably going to be the star child of the kit. This is made from a multi-layer cotton gauze filter. It's a conical filter as opposed to the flat paper element option, and it also has that diamond wire mesh on the outside. Now the dry filter is going to do a really superb job pulling in all of that cold air and keeping out all of the dust and air particles and dirt, all that nonsense you don't want getting into your engine bay. This is going to make sure it filters out. As a matter of fact, K&N's been doing this for so many years. They're one of the most premium options on the market. As a matter of fact, some of the other kits out there in the category actually source K&N's filters for their own kits. That's how premium they are. This dry filter option is going to require zero maintenance. It is washable and reusable, but it's not going to require any oiling, so you don't have to worry about picking that up. Oiled versus dry has been a debate that's going on in the aftermarket world for a while, and to be honest, they're within a 1% difference of performance. Dry filters are typically better for the guys out there doing a lot of off-roading, located in those dry weather climates, seeing a lot of more air pollution, a lot more dust and dirt, because oiled filters can get clogged up a lot more and require more maintenance if you're located in those areas. Oil filters, on the other hand, do filter out a little bit better. They just tend to get a little bit more clogged because of the oil. With all of that in mind, this one here is going to have a 99.9% filter efficiency rate, which is going to do wonders for its performance. This whole entire kit here comes with a velocity stack built in, so you're going to adapt that to your heat shield. The heat shield here is made from a billet aluminum, powder coated in black. Great for blocking out all of that excess engine heat, but keeping the cold air in. And in order to help that out, we've got weather stripping here included in the kit that we're going to line this with, so it will seal up into the inside of your hood, blocking all of that out for a leak-free finish. It's got a bunch of new stainless steel clamps, all new hardware. We're going to bolt up our factory MAP sensor to the new tubing here with that pre-drilled hole. No modifications necessary. With all of that in mind, you can pick the kit up for right around 300 bucks, and the install is going to get 1 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. Anybody can tackle it in about an hour, maybe 2 at the absolute most, and I'm going to show you guys step by step how this gets done with very simple hand tools. So what do you say we get started? Tools used in this install include an impact gun, extension, 8, 10, 12, and 13 millimeter deep sockets, a small Allen key set, 5 32nd hex socket, 10 and 15 millimeter wrenches, needle nose pliers, wire cutters, Phillips head screwdriver, and thread tape. All right guys, the first step is to disconnect the negative terminal on your battery just to be safe. Grab your 10 millimeter socket. I know I'm using an impact gun. It's a little awkward, a little weird positioning here, but we're gonna get this off. Just gonna loosen up that terminal. Just pop that off and set it down and out of the way. Step number 2, using that same 10 millimeter deep socket, remove the 2 nuts holding on the engine cover. All right, you're gonna set those aside to be reinstalled later, but for now, pop that cover out of place. All right, with the 10 mil socket, we're gonna loosen up the clamp holding on that factory tubing. Once that's loosened up, you can disconnect the tubing. All right, now while we're over here, we're just gonna disconnect our factory mass airflow sensor. Just pinch down and pull back on that harness. Just set that out of the way. We'll have to remove that later on, but we'll do that right at the end of this. Once this is all taken care of, we'll pop that off. For now, we're gonna work on getting this tubing out of place. Now the next step is gonna be to disconnect the entire tubing and the resonator from the inner fender. There's 1 bracket on the top end and 1 on the bottom. Those are 12 millimeter bolts. I'm gonna use an extension with my impact gun to get those off. At this point, with those 2 bracket bolts out of the way, just pull the entire tubing from the inside of that fender and set it aside. Now your factory paper element filter is sitting right in this air box. In order to get this off, pop that clip off, one underneath of it, rotate those forward, and that'll dislodge that. You can pull this whole thing apart. The next step is to reach behind the factory airbox and disconnect the fuel pressure regulator hose. You just pull straight back on the nipple. That's this hose right here. I know it's tough to see. It's a tight space there, but you have the instructions included in the kit that'll point out the location. Hopefully this helps you out a little bit. Next step, disconnect your crankcase breather hose on the front end. Grab a pair of pliers, pinch that retainer clip, and pull straight back on that hose to disconnect. You want to leave that pin or retainer clip on there. Grab your 10mm socket and loosen up the clamp holding the factory airbox to the throttle body. Now before you pop that off the throttle body, remove the last bolt holding that airbox in place with your 10mm. Set that aside. All right, so we do have one more retainer bolt down here by the MAF harness. We are gonna have to disconnect the clips on that MAF harness too, but for now, let's get that bolt out of the way. I'm gonna use an extension and my 10mm socket. Get that off and set that aside. Next, we gotta disconnect the electrical connectors holding on the factory mass airflow sensor harness. That we're just gonna pull straight back on, disconnect. And the same thing down here. This one actually looks like it's zip tied, so we're gonna get our wire cutters and snip this off. Instead of using wire cutters to just snip that, you can use needle nose pliers to pry that off of its factory spot. All right, at this point, we can get those harnesses out of the way, disconnect this from the throttle body, and set the whole thing aside. So we finally got that factory intake off of our 4-liter Tacoma and on the table next to our Series 63 option from K&N. Now, as you can see, clear night and day differences between the two, and I know I already talked about all the details for the K&N, but seeing this filter side by side with the factory filter just gives you a better perspective on how much of an upgrade this is going to be. This being that 360-degree conical filter, definitely going to be doing a lot better of a job than your factory paper element filter. Now that we can pop out of this housing here, and you can see the difference. So this is your factory filter that comes in a lot of these trucks like Toyota uses, Ford uses, Chevy uses, a lot of these paper elements. It's a really common thing from the factory, but as you can see, it sucks up a lot of that dirt and it's really not gonna do the greatest job pulling in as much cold air as it can. Being trapped up in this airbox, being a lot farther away from the outside cold air, it's just not gonna be there for performance. This factory airbox is going to do really good for blocking out excess engine heat, but this is also snug up against the intake manifold. This is going to be a lot closer to the opening in your fender rather than being closer to the engine itself. So this is going to do a lot better pulling in that cold air, and it's going to do a lot better filtering out. Now this has seen a lot of miles. It's definitely due for some routine maintenance, which is something you can do here being a washable and reusable filter. Not really saying the same for the factory one. You typically need to pick up a new filter to replace your factory paper element. Not the case here. So the last thing I want to talk about is the tubing. The factory tubing has that flexibility in the kinks you see here. This is going to cause a lot of air turbulence in that factory tubing. Air turbulence is going to translate to robbed power. This is going to translate to a little bit more raw power. This is going to pull in cold air faster, it's going to streamline it, and it's not going to restrict it. Now with this tubing, we do have to transfer over a factory MAF sensor. That's on the top of this factory airbox. Just a couple of screws that we're going to pop that off and transfer it over with the gasket included in the kit. So what I want to do now is toss some of this stuff off to the side. Let's focus on transferring that over for now, and then we'll start assembling our heat shield. All right, now getting this MAF sensor off is going to be as simple as grabbing a Phillips head screwdriver and just popping off those 2 factory screws. It is pretty dirty, but if you need to, you can grab PB Blaster or something and just grease it up and get some of that dirt free. Keep in mind, these Phillips head screws are not going to be reused. All right, once you have that, just get that loose and just be real careful with this. You definitely don't want to damage it. Set aside that factory intake and just set it on its face. From here, grab the gasket with the 3M tape on the back. Now the 3M tape is going to be facing down, so you just want to peel off that layer and we'll get that applied. Right around the edge here. All right, once you have that around the lip, just put pressure all around to make sure that stickiness is going to apply itself. From there, we'll be able to install it onto our 4-liter. You just want to make sure it's oriented properly and seated all the way down. All right, so now that you see how the mass airflow sits, you want to make sure that you're using the black plastic spacers included in the kit, as well as the hex screws. So now that you see that that's oriented this way, what we're going to do is basically line up these spacers and drop this back into place. Use these screws to tighten it down by hand. You can always slip them in from the bottom. Grab your Allen key, or if you have a hex socket, that'll work as well, and just get them to thread through and then tighten them down. The next step here is to grab your hose fitting that has the threading on the inside and thread it into the open hole on the side here. Now, it's not required, but it is a good idea to use thread tape to make sure that this gets a leak-free seal. You don't want any air leaks coming through there, and thread tape will make sure that that does not happen. So I'm gonna grab a piece of thread tape here, just break off a piece, and just wrap it around the threading on our fitting. Now we can thread this on by hand. Now it can be really easy to cross thread these, so you just want to make sure you're getting it nice and tight by hand, and then going back with your 15mm socket and tightening it down. All right, now you just want to get it nice and hand tight. Once you do, grab a 15 socket and give it 2 complete turns. Next up, grab your rubber mounted stud. It's got studs on both sides, and just thread one side into the open hole on your intake. Just get that nice and hand tight. From here we can set the intake tube aside, bring our heat shield into place, and we'll start assembling those brackets. The next step here is to install these 2 brackets onto your heat shield. Now that bottom lip that L's off is gonna go right underneath of it, and we're gonna install that on both sides. Grab the bolts included in the kit with a washer on both sides, and we're just gonna put that through and then cap it off with the nut on the other side. Just gonna thread that on by hand, do the same thing for the bottom. Now the other side is going to get the same bracket. All right, grab a 10mm socket and a 10mm wrench and tighten it down. Once you have that bracket straight, hold the nut from the outside and just tighten it down from the inside. Next up, we do have one more bracket. This is a smaller one going right over this circle opening. We're going to do the same process here. We're going to take one of the bolts included in the kit, put it through the longer end of this bracket, put a washer on the back side, top it off with a lock nut. Tighten it down with the same tools. Next up here is grab the smaller weather stripping included in the kit, and on the bottom side, where the bottom of the brackets are, we're just going to line the inside of this. Now we can flip this over, do the same thing for the top portion. Now for the top, you want to go all the way down the sides as well. At this point, if there is any excess, you can just cut that off with wire cutters. Next step is to assemble our saddle clamp. Now that's going to be installed with this black bracket, just like this. In order to do that, we're going to take this hex bolt included in the kit. That's going to go through the top, seats right into that little cup nicely. Next up is going to be your funnel spacer. I'm gonna put that in, that hugs nicely as well. Flat washer through. You're gonna do another washer on the back end of that, and then your nylon lock nut. All right, grab a 5/32 socket and a 10mm wrench and tighten this down. You might need to get it snug and then reposition that bracket on the bottom and then get it nice and tight. All right, now we're back under the hood. We're gonna have to remove one nut on the ABS pump here by our fender on our passenger side. Grab a 12mm socket. I'm using an extension as well. And we're just gonna pop off the one that's closest to the fender. Make this a little more powerful. There we go. Now set this aside because this is gonna get reinstalled in just a moment. I'm gonna set it up here on our cowl. All right, at this point we can take our heat shield all assembled and drop it into place. The bracket we installed on the left side is gonna go over the stud on the ABS pump that we just took the nut off of. Grab that nut, and I know it's a little bit difficult, but you can put it on the extension and a 12mm socket and just thread that back on. Now I know it's a tight space and it's hard to see, but once you get that nut on there, you should put your socket in there with an extension and tighten it down. Next up, I'm going to reuse that factory 13mm bolt that's going to go down here next to our power steering pump. Now again, this is a little bit of a tricky situation to see, but just feed that down with an extension and socket and just get it threaded. And once you start getting it threaded, grab your impact gun and you'll be able to tighten it down. Last step, take the bolt and washer, include it in the kit, and bolt it down to the middle bracket that we installed right under that circle opening. The next step here, guys, is to grab your coupler, install 2 of the smaller clamps over each end, but loosely, and insert that over the end of your throttle body. Now, I like to rotate it so your K&N logo is facing up. You can also rotate that down if you don't want any branding facing upward. I like to tuck the clamps downward so they're not just, sticking out like a sore thumb. At this point, you can grab an 8mm socket and tighten down the one attaching it to the throttle body. A flathead screwdriver would also work here. All right, grab the tubing at this point. We're gonna insert the end with the hose fitting into that throttle body opening on the coupler. And make sure it fully seats and it's rotated upward. Tighten down that clamp. Now at this point, your factory hose is gonna get reused into this location, but it's not meant to bend at this angle. So what we're gonna have to do is pop the hose off of the valve cover and just reverse it. So grab your pair of pliers, pinch that retainer clip at the valve, and just pop it off. All right, we're gonna flip it around just the other way. You can rotate these pins facing upward. We're gonna pinch it and just reconnect it to the valve. Now this end is already bent. Now if you need needleless pliers, you can do that. If not, you can just grab it by hand and just get it to insert over that fitting and pinch shut. You can also, at this point, grab that MAF sensor harness and plug that in. The next step is to install our saddle bracket. Now this is gonna hold the bottom of the intake tubing right to the valve cover. We're gonna feed that underneath along with that bracket, and the bracket's gonna install to the pre-threaded hole right here on the side of that valve cover. So we're gonna bolt that down first, and then we're gonna clamp it around our tubing. Take the bolt, include it in the kit, the 10mm bolt, along with a lock washer and a flat washer. I'm gonna thread it on and then I'll show you guys where that is. Just gonna go right down by hand as far as we can go. Perfect, that'll hold it in position. Before we tighten that down, I wanna get a clamp around this. Now that clamp we are gonna have to take apart, just like this, so loosen it up, take that apart, thread that underneath and around the edges of the saddle bracket. Now we're going to come back and connect them and tighten that down a bit. Now at this point, I'm going to rotate that clamp downward, making sure that it's still wrapped around the saddle and the tubing. Grab an 8mm socket and tighten down that clamp. Switch over to a 10mm socket and an extension and tighten down the bolt on the valve cover. Perfect. That is going to be a support bracket, making sure that tubing stays in place. All right, next up we have to remove that factory fuel pressure hose. We're going to replace it with pretty much an identical one that's just a lot longer to extend over to our fitting on our tubing. Take the end of that fuel pressure hose and just pull straight back, disconnect it. Set that aside. That is not going to be reinstalled. We're going to be replacing it with this. So just pop on the new one over that factory nipple, extend that over to the fitting on our tubing, and pop that all the way back. Next up, we're going to go to the opposite end of our tubing, install the coupler here with the smaller end facing the tubing and 2 clamps over each end. Slide that all the way in. All right, here you want about half on this side, half on the inside. Tighten down the 1 clamp holding it to the tubing. Grab your filter and put it on the other end. Now that filter does have to get installed with a velocity stack. Now the velocity stack is going to go funnel side in. I'm going to seat that all the way back into the filter, get that nice and flush against the edges. Rotate the large clamp around and just tighten it down. I like to have them all facing the same side. Perfect. Make sure that's tight on the velocity stack. Drop that into place. All right, once you have that seated, go in with your socket. I think we're gonna need an extension for this one and just tighten down that clamp on the coupler. Perfect. All right, the last step here before we reconnect the negative cable on our battery is to pop our engine cover back on. Snap it onto the back bar, drop it down into place, and reuse those factory nuts to tighten it back down. Perfect. Let's reconnect that negative cable and we'll be done. Drop that down, grab your 10mm socket. All right, now you're good to go. Well guys, that's gonna wrap up my review and install for the K&N Series 63 AirCharge cold air intake, available for the 05 to 11 4-liter Tacoma. You can pick yours up right here at extremeterrain.com.